to touch base into chapters 2 and 3 of David Meerman Scott, because I think this part is specifically important when it comes to, again, this seamless idea of A, controlling your narrative, and B, seamless advertising. And to go along with this, I dive into a little bit of a personal example, and it rings pretty close to home because my wife and I currently are shopping for a house. And so while we're looking for a house, it's kind of interesting of how things are done nowadays versus, when I looked for a house several years ago when I was single and, looking when I was teaching as a lecturer position. And through that, when we were searching for homes, there was an online presence, but never before has there been such a breadth of online presence. I used to work in a grocery store once upon a time, and they would always have these little catalogs, and they still do, for real estate organizations. And again, I still see them. There was a couple right outside of where Peppers and Harris Teeter were in Boone. However, I went through several different places like your Walmarts, like your Publix here in Boone, and I couldn't find any. But where I did find them are on real estate websites and Zillow and Craigslist. And these were some of the minor outlets that we were looking through. Now, granted, are they the most reliable? That's a whole nother question, and that will be something I get into here in a minute. But again, it's the research that my wife and I were conducting to see what's the best fit for us and how much do we want to spend. And, these are those areas that are so important when it comes to the research. And again, I point back to, in this age of digital media, y'all are the researchers. And it only makes sense for those who I know who have bought like NFL jerseys, for instance. They're expensive. And, for many people, it's kind of considered an ill-advised purchase to buy something that's, $200 some odd for an authentic NFL jersey, where they look at, for example, knockoffs on third-party websites and eBay. But again, how reliable is that? And so we crave these reviews. And this is an interesting facet that I want to point out in terms of the social element of advertising, more specifically when it comes to talking about that word of mouth that people so often refer to. Because, there's a part of that of people will just be brand loyal and buy the things that have worked for them. However, if they're looking through forums or even going on Amazon, Amazon did this right in terms of taking this information and putting a star rating and a forum to say, this is what I like about it, this is what I don't like about it, these are the star reviews, and we look through them. And we could be duped by some sites with no reviews. So again, Amazon does this right. For textbooks even, Amazon will say, I'll even show you the damn book, for the most part. Actually, a lot of times when I look through my curriculum development for a class, I'll even go into Amazon and check what are students saying about it. I'll check what's in the book in terms of the content of, like the appendix, as well as the table of contents. They're very important to me, although I don't recommend looking at Media Flight Plan for the Amazon, only because it doesn't exactly get the best reviews for it. But I assure you, I got it for a reason for y'all to get. By the way, I hope that's going well. So if you're having any trouble with that, please let me know. So again, these are those tools that, again, help us control that narrative and help us build up a basis. And y'all are researchers because you want what's best in any given particular product. So a couple of things that I'll also mention, and this is another point that I thought was really interesting in Chapter 2 of David Meerman Scott, was this ideology of public relations and getting into action. Now, I realize this is an advertising course, but I consider my work to be more of strategic communication. And I was actually just talking with somebody the other day about the ideology of advertising and PR, and they're separate groups, and they don't like to coexist and coagulate with each other. They're just not good friends for the most part. Especially when it comes to research, if I'm an advertising person, I can't dive into PR and vice versa. But in many cases, there's this area of strategic communication where they combine very well together. And you see that more and more when these companies take the wheel. There's a couple of chapters in a subject called Corporate Social Responsibility that not only talks about PR, but advertising, again, collaborating together to make a good CSR message. Again, CSR equals Corporate Social Responsibility. I'll get into some examples later, but again, we need to get into action. And never before have people been more interested in good PR than we are right now. And again, I use that example of Appalachian Mountain Brewery because, again, they're always doing something. The 5 times that I've been here, or been there since my wife and I moved to Boone, the four out of the 5 times there was an event going on. So it was for veterans. It was for dog lovers. There was one time where they had a little mini pony, but they also had little tokens that you could put into a slot when you purchased a beer. And that was really interesting in terms of bringing that community together and saying Appalachian Mountain Brewery is all about community. And I know other breweries do this. I know a lot of organizations do that. That one just always kind of appears into my brain. And a socially responsible company will almost always beat out their competitor. So if you are a specific team, a specific organization that is socially responsible, that likes to give to the community, you're always going to have the leg up. And interestingly enough, one of the first organizations to really start in that area was Hershey's. If you've ever been to Hershey, Pennsylvania, it's kind of a cool place, but they take care of the employees by giving them that place to stay in Hershey, Pennsylvania, if you decide to work for Hershey in that case. And there's just all these amenities and benefits for Hershey. And again, one of their main premises was taking care of their employees. So things like events, donations, incentives. It's funny for me because, again, I'm such a big craft beer lover that I'd sit there and say for Appalachian Mountain Brewery, I'd say drink beer and help out the community. Yeah, I'm going to do that every step of the way. So again, and you're controlling your narrative once again, and you don't need the middle person of the journalist to write out the story. And we will. The big thing about that is how much can a journalist really promote what you love to do? Again, I think I mentioned this last lecture, is the idea of media framing. Journalists only have so much time, and they get press releases all the time, and all these things are being written. And again, who can say it better than you? So cut out the middle person and publish it yourself. And can't we just show people all this cool stuff we're doing? And that's a cool way to do it, is to be able to go on things like Facebook, Twitter, and so forth, and describe some of the things you're doing, post videos of the things you're doing, take pictures of the things you're doing. And again, that, depending on what you're interested in, works for a lot of different companies there. And a journalist may care, but you really care. And again, this comes from writing in a newspaper in Blacksburg, Virginia, where Virginia Tech is. I get a press release at least daily. Several organizations would let me know of something cool that they were doing. And I cared, and I was interested, but again, they were the ones that were so excited about it. They were the ones that said, this is this new product we're developing, and it's really awesome, and it's really great, and we can't wait to show it to you, or we're doing this benefit, we really want to talk about it, we want you to write about it. And in this case, you can do that work. And again, if you're ever interested in this kind of thing, look no further into craft breweries. They are some of the most interesting corporate Can't talk. Corporately responsible companies. That again, that I don't even think that was a word. Socially responsible companies. Just say it like that. Oh my goodness. But again, they really show how much they care and want to be a part of the development. It's one of the most interesting ways of advertising. And again, these craft breweries are leading the way. So if you ever want to look at innovative techniques, that's a cool area to look into. So one thing that is not mentioned in David Meerman Scott that I want to mention is this: can there be a long tail causes to support your organization? And absolutely. And so you have to think that when it comes to specific causes, and this is what I'm going to refer to, is that there may be things that most people say, yes, I care about. Like, everybody deserves a good education. I think most people can agree, yes, that is a right. You should have a good education. And education is extremely important. So, those are kind of that long tail of the higher end of the mainstream, if you will. However, there is something called cause-related marketing that's really interesting, and it's kind of taking off right now in terms of what you're interested in. And I'll give you a few examples that I always found really interesting. First and foremost is Kentucky Fried Chicken. And this is going to sound a little ironic, but hear me out in terms of the success for it. So Kentucky Fried Chicken decided that they were going to make, I can't remember what year this was, a pink bucket for breast cancer awareness. So October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and during that time, KFC decided that they were going to make a pink bucket. So that was, and it was really interesting that they did that. In fact, one of my favorite professors I ever had, she specializes in corporate social responsibility. She said, I almost ran my car off the road to get to this KFC once I saw the pink bucket, because she goes, I have to look at this. I have to see what they're doing. And the immediate reaction was, the irony of the situation is, we're preventing something that is awful that happens to women. And this is important. It's an important cause. And again, this is at its core good cause marketing. Well, what's the number one cause for death in females is heart disease. And so again, fried chicken and heart disease seems to go hand in hand pretty well together. But interestingly enough, it was the most successful CSR campaign ever. And so again, despite the fact that it was so ironic that it was done like this, it really put things into perspective of how interesting it can be. And it also goes to show you that cause-related marketing in terms of specific causes, and those causes within the long tail is that people kind of search out things like breast cancer awareness, for example. You might also say, well, Dr. Daniel, I'm someone who really cares about the environment. Interestingly enough, and this always shocks a lot of students when I tell them this, is Walmart donates more to environmental non-government organizations than any other company or government agency, which anytime that happens, I always have a student that just kind of sits there like, because now I will laugh if that actually becomes the thumbnail for this video. I might have to change it. But they get so stunned because they're like, I can't stand Walmart. I don't like what they stand for. But again, depending on what you're looking at, if you like things like employee, the care of employees, you might look at, again, Hershey's or Ben & Jerry's treats their employees very well. In fact, it's part of their mission statement. And if you're interested in this kind of thing, this can be something discussed on Friday, because I know a lot about this information when it comes to corporate social responsibility, and I can actually help out. If you're interested in this kind of thing and want to market in this kind of way, this is something that can definitely be talked about. So again, if you're interested in CSR, please let me know, and I will be happy to talk about this. So I will mention in Chapter 2 to check on the new rules of marketing. And you'll see things, but marketing is more than just advertising. And again, that goes into that strategic communication of it's PR too now. Marketing works with PR. PR is more than just a mainstream media audience. It's specific. And again, I mentioned that in terms of that cause-related marketing. If you are looking in a particular element that you identify with so well, that's something that you might want to focus on, and you will benefit from it for the most part. So again, it's not just about what you're advertising in regards to your product, but it's also the service that you do. Authenticity, we've talked about. Participation, we've talked about. Again, you can go through these, and I would really make sure you know these, because we will be talking about them over and over and over again, as well as this may be something that I kind of talk a little bit on the exam. So kind of keep your eye out on it. But I think one of the most interesting ones was at the very end. It says, on the web, the lines between marketing and PR have been blurred. And this has to do with that interaction. And I actually want to talk to you a little bit and hope that on the forum that you will be able to answer this for Wednesday, is that how has marketing and PR been blurred? What is it about this interaction that can make it so we have not only good development for our product, but also public relations as well? And interestingly enough, again, if you join that conversation, you can be very successful for this. One organization for that was Mellow Mushroom. Mellow Mushroom is one of my favorite pizza places. But they did a really cool thing in terms of there was an Iraqi soldier that decided, I want to buy a pizza for my wife while I'm out in the Middle East. And, and by the way, pretty cool that you can do that now. But he emailed the organization and said, look, I want to do this for my wife. It's her birthday. I just think it would be a cool gesture. So I'm going to tell you the order that I want, and then I've got to go out for some basic duty and so forth. But when I come back, I'll provide my payment information, provided you got this. And interestingly enough, on Mellow Mushroom, they had a message from their CEO that says, "We got you, bro." That's all it said. And what happened next was a photo shared on social media by his wife that had a heart-shaped pizza, as well as a couple of appetizers and balloons that were delivered to her door. And it was completely free. And so this picture went viral. There were so many people that said, I am going there tomorrow. I am going to Mellow Mushroom tomorrow. That is so awesome that you did that. And again, this is that notion of cause-related marketing, of supporting our troops, and especially families of those who are overseas. And what a cool moment. And so many people got behind Mellow Mushroom in this case. So again, that's just one example of where lines of marketing and PR have been blurred. You can do a cause-related advertisement and still have that same effect versus saying there's this new awesome pizza that we're doing at Mellow Mushroom. And they do that too. They do that as well. So again, look through those new rules. If you have any questions about them, please let me know. The last thing I want to talk about, and I mentioned this to somebody who sent me a brief email and said, was it a typo about reading chapters 2, 4, and 5 instead of 3, 4, and 5? To that, I wanted to mention that although I didn't have you read chapter 3, there was one thing that I think I missed that I really wanted to mention real quick, and that is the idea of the buyer persona, which you will probably be looking into pretty within the advertising campaign that you'll be working, or excuse me, the media plan that you'll be working with upcoming in the not too distant future. We'll talk more about that probably next week, is when we'll get into the final project of the class and start talking about what we'll be doing. So what is a buyer persona? We talk a lot about demographics in terms of statistical information that help identify people in a buying market. We talk about psychographics, which can be also specified, but they're more collective in terms of your behavior instead of some of the basic things about who you are. So these are all variants of that information, but you may be familiar with the idea of a population and a sample when it comes to research. So a population is a group of people. The sample is a representative of that population. So when we're dealing with things like Nielsen ratings, one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is that the Nielsen ratings doesn't calculate every single TV that's watching the Super Bowl. They're provided an estimate of what they're going to be projecting in the population. So again, that's all user generated. And again, if you're interested in the Nielsen ratings, I'd love to talk to you about it. I've participated in several Nielsen ratings. They're pretty cool, and they actually pay you to do it, albeit not much, but it's still really cool. So again, when we talk about the population to sample, we can almost say that the buyer persona is a representation within that sample. So it would be easy to say that you all are college students, because that is part of what I could put in data to identify. So when I'm going over your media log, I can say everybody here is a college student. However, you have given me very different answers in terms of what you do with your free time, what your hobbies are, and that makes a big difference in terms of how I would be missing the mark when it comes to a buyer persona. So I don't know if I actually got into the definition of a buyer persona. Buyer persona is actually personifying that population, that sample, and saying this is a representative of a collective, a cluster within that sample. And the way we do it is we give them an identity, and we usually give them a name, and we give them characteristics, and that kind of represents of, again, who my buyers are. And that's really interesting to come into play here, and it's something that I'll want us to kind of practice. But the problem is that there's a generalization kind of attached to it, because, again, I could say that you all are college students, just as much as I could say people of the age of, 18 to 35, or maybe it was 32 or something, would be considered millennials. In fact, there's also, for voting, the 18 to 29-year-old demographic. And it's interesting to think that, do you consider an 18-year-old to be the exact same as a 29-year-old or a 35-year-old or a 32-year-old? To where they've said, okay, we need to specify this even more. Because again, is an 18-year-old and a 29-year-old the same thing? And typically, no, it isn't. We all have different interests. We do different things. And that's an important consideration to bring into play here when it comes to this generalization. So I'm going to post a link on your As You Learn, and it's about Harley Davidson, and it's for dual purpose, and their project was to sell Harley Davidson to college students. And it was one thing to just show you this for buyer personas. I do want you to recognize this as kind of the collective of what a media plan kind of looks like, because aside from some of the information that's provided on there that's hard to read, it does put some good insight in. And so let me give you a quick example of what we might be looking for. So some psychographic information, granted this was in 2008, I think, decided that we're going to have these two different sets of parents to classify that was going to represent what was called a buyer persona. And one was called a NASCAR dad, which personified a gentleman that lived in the Southeast, that spent his Sundays watching NASCAR or football for that set in that way. Very family oriented, likes a lot of traditional things. They're very brand loyal. For in this case, for vowels, the psychographic information, they would be kind of considered a traditionalist or a believer. And when I say believer, they, again, very brand loyal. That's one of those characteristics. And the other was, again, and this is 2008, was a Sex and the City mom. And this is a person who cares about their family deeply, but at the same time loves to go out with their friends, loves to go out and have cocktails, loves to talk about sex openly. And this was kind of an interesting thing in 2008 that kind of defined not only the way we're advertising to men and women in a lot of cases, but also in the consideration for how television and entertainment media is brought out. So, again, let me come with a forewarning that these may not represent you. These may not even come close to representing you. But it was something interesting to consider in terms of how we're promoting this whole new perspective of demographics and psychographics. And again, that classifies within that buyer persona. And again, I'll go into the Harley Davidson example just to kind of give you a little taste of what that might look at. So I'm trying to think if there was anything else I really wanted to talk about. No, I think that's about it. Sorry. Again, I was going over some of the things in Chapter 3, and I wanted to cover over what was going to be most important, and buyer personas was one. I was like, missed that. So, so anyway, like I said, kind of keep a framework on looking through James Potter for Wednesday. I'm going to be talking about that quite a bit, as well as some key characteristics on chapters 4 and 5. But yeah, if there are any questions, let me know. Please participate on the forum. I'd love to hear from y'all in terms of what you think about this. You know, is this still making sense? Is it too repetitive? Is it something that you feel like isn't really hitting the mark as well as you thought it would? Again, please talk. And this is something that we can kind of work through in this case, especially when coming up with our own media plans. So I hope you all have a great Tuesday, and I will see you all tomorrow. Thanks. Bye.